there's no casino on earth that'll only let you place your bets once you've known you've won. Advertising is certainly not gambling, but you definitely have to throttle to an uncomfortable level before you start to see that revenue come in, especially Black Friday. Advertising the correct products, constantly monitoring the LTV metrics on the day, on the week, on the month, planning those returning customer activations pre and post Black Friday. Let us know that we can still pull back ad spend, run out those promotions like 12 days of Christmas, and blend out performance metrics to where we need them to be for profit metrics. We're
Yeah,
not acquiring them for their fantastic first order profitability, although they
correct.
are. We're acquiring them to for their future lifetime revenue. Call those cards in, we ask for those favors and we can make sense of it either way.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Triple Whale's 10 Tactics to Master to Maximize This Gift Giving Season. I saved one of the best episodes and one of the best guests almost for last year. I'm pumped to be joined by the CMO of Portland Leather Goods, MacCoy the Maverick Merkley. What's up, dude?
Hey, I appreciate that. It's quite the intro.
How are you, man?
Life's good, man. It's been a year. I think everyone's probably felt it a little bit, but we're cruising through. We got big plans for the future, so I'm optimistic and yeah, life's good.
Hell yeah, awesome, man. I want to tell the story of how we met and my kind of first impression for you. I actually haven't even told you this from my
Or
perspective
haven't
yet.
heard it.
So
No.
here we go. We met, I think it was like 2 years ago, at that conference in Austin. I was a year into this new job at Original Grain. For those of you who don't know, I don't know how you got to episode 9 without knowing that I'm the VP of marketing for Original Grain Watch Company. But I was a year into this job, and I felt like I had gotten the marketing department and marketing mix in a place where I was happy with. And meeting you and talking to you about how you're approaching advertising made me realize that I was on the right track. I was on the right path, but I was crawling on that path and you were sprinting on it. And that really lit a fire under us. My marketing team hated it because I came back from that conference and I was like, we got to 10x everything we're doing because we're getting lapped over here by MacCoy. But I think you have such a great perspective on not just kind of like advertising tactics, but more importantly, how to use advertising to grow a profitable brand. So you've done that really well at Portland Leather, and I think it's going to be great for the people to hear some of your expertise.
Well, I appreciate it, man. That's I hadn't heard that story yet. I remember
Yeah,
that conference or meetup, whatever it was, very well. So it's funny to see it from the
yeah. So, all right, I'm going to jump into just like a couple things that I do on the advertising front, and then I'll kick it over to you. I think the word of advertising in 2024 is volatility. Like everyone I talk to is like, we'll have a month that crushes, we'll have a week that crushes, and then performance falls off a cliff and no one knows what's going on. For us, we've been able to kind of create some stability through kind of two main tactics. We keep our inputs consistent. Um, I think every time I hear from someone whose outcomes are inconsistent, they tell me that they've got pretty inconsistent inputs as well. They'll try this account structure for a month and then change, or they'll test 100 new ads for a month and then won't test any creative for a while. And we've kind of overcome that just by our inputs being consistent. For us, that means we make changes to our ad account once a week on Tuesdays. We turn off bad ads, launch new ones, tweak budgets. And that's kind of half the story of how we are creating predictability and stability. The other half is we are not reactive to kind of day-to-day performance. Weekly is when we kind of look at things and see what's going on. And even on a 7-day scale, we don't really overreact and look at a lot of things in kind of like a 14 or a 30-day window. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys have been able to create some stability as well this year?
Yeah. I mean, just a little like context and background. I don't do like a lot of like podcasts or even talk. I don't network as much as I should. So it's possible you may not know me or my story. I started with Portland Leather Goods in 2018. At the time, the company was primarily an Etsy company. We were doing about 3.5 million, I think, for our second year in a row. So it was a little um, stuck trying to scale. And when I started, the website was doing about $800 a day. I was a person who came in to I'm a recovering wedding photographer, so that's my background in advertising was learning how to sell wedding photography to engage women. So I knew how to, do some targeting on Meta. But the website was doing about $800 a day. We just closed out last year at over 120 million. So that's been, thank you very much. That's kind of my
Unreal. I'm sorry for
experience.
not gassing you up more in the intro because
No,
yeah,
no, no. I appreciate it.
the explosion of growth that you guys have had is insane. And I think you guys have done it in some of the most challenging years for ecom in recent memory.
Right. Why? Yeah, I mean, from COVID to where we're going through now. So I describe building my at least my share of Portland leather is my experience with it. It's kind of like building like a 6 or 7 year Lego set. You know,
Mhm,
it's not new. It's you're just always adding pieces and trying to learn and grow. So um I mean, I've been through a lot of different seasons, as I think a lot of e-commerce operators who've been in one business for a long period of time, that you've seen the volatility. So when I know we wanted to talk about like how do we create predictable results or how do we create like stable results in an advertising ecosystem? And as I've gone through my personal like advertising and marketing journey, one, I just kind of loathe the word like advertising and marketing because there's just these gigantic like buckets that are way too large to accurately describe the activity or even the
mhm,
phases that we ourselves as marketers or advertisers go through inside of a business, right? So for me, and I'm famous for rambling and giving too much information, but hopefully it's helpful. But for me personally, I started from having to ask and get written permission to spend $20 a day to now managing upwards of 20-30 million dollars, and being from a one-man team building the business up to the 15-30 million dollar mark to now having a team who supports the marketing and advertising and e-commerce functions. So I've gone through several different phases of where that answer may be different depending on like my roles and responsibilities, so bringing me to where I am today, which is as the CMO of Port Leather Goods. So again, whoever your audience is or whatever they're listening, they may have a tough time relating depending on like their scope of responsibility. Where that leads me to is when we think about like volatility or predictability in an advertising ecosystem. That's kind of the main train of thought we want to stay on. It's going to be very very difficult if you are a media buyer who's basically like been shoved in a corner and told to run meta ads. That for
mhm,
me is like my absolute like pinnacle nightmare scenario, because you don't have enough insight, you don't have enough control, you don't have enough like know or knowledge of the goings on of the business. Because if we were to try to tackle the problem, uh, instead of how do we create stability, we can ask ourselves what causes instability. That list is as long as we can possibly imagine. There's economic conditions. The business is constantly changing underneath our feet. The seasonality is changing beneath our feet. What products the business is giving us to advertise is constantly changing. What's coming through the operations department, product availability, all of those reasons can create instability in an advertising ecosystem. So when we reverse engineer that and we say, okay, these are all of the variables, and I would recommend you write that out for yourself or for your business and make that list exhaustive. Like as long as you can possibly sit there and write reasons for why advertising maybe become volatile or we might not have a predictable result. Write that as long as you possibly can, even if it takes you an hour.
mhm,
And then you can kind of take those reasons and put them into buckets. Like, okay, let's look at like inventory availability for an instance, right? You're going to have a pretty poor performance on Meta if your number one product is out of stock and you're advertising it, right? So that might be one of 10,000 things on our list. Then you can start to take those problems or those factors or variables that may cause instability and start to look at them through the lens of like, okay, how can I prevent this? Can I prevent this? Is this somebody else's responsibility in the business that I need to be constantly networking with, that I need to be conversing with to anticipate volatility? Do I need to be throttling up my ad spend during great times, throttling it down during seasons where product availability is maybe a little bit more strained? And you can go through this extremely exhaustive list. And certainly, as you are higher in the ranks, whether I know you're the VP, if you're a CMO, this becomes easier and easier. This is again my nightmare scenario: is you're an ad buyer who's just kicked
right.
into the corner and told to just do it. But in any case, hopefully this is illustrative of like, okay, before we even think about how we're going to create it, we need to understand all the reasons why it might go haywire.
Yeah.
Even if nothing theoretically is changing with our account structure, with our creative, with our product pricing, with our website conversion rate due to site speed. Let's assume all that's static. What are all the things that could change that create that instability? Let's tackle those first and try to understand them before we try to like monitor them and create fail safes to create stability through the stabilization of those factors.
Dude, that's such a good little monologue for people to really, I think, internalize. Like, I feel like 90% of the time where we have a week or we have a month where like we missed forecast by, either crushed it, like we were way over or under, it's always due to something that's not in our ad account. Like it's way more often due to like, oh, we sold out, or there was a holiday and it ended. Or I don't know, the American economy sucks and Americans are struggling to buy groceries right now. And I feel like the media buyer always gets the blame of like, hey, why did Facebook ads stop working? It's like, well, we sold out of our top product and it's July, which is our natural slow season. So like that's why our ROAS is down. I think that's really, really insightful.
Yeah, again, like so often I think the advertising system, like we exist on the very, very tail end of so much motion that happens in a business. We have to conceptualize and design a company from the ground up. We have to decide what we're going to sell, the products. We have to, go through our brand identity and put up a website. And at the very end of it, you just pass it to some poor soul. And again, in the corner, I'm using that as kind of like the token bad idea. And he puts beep boop beep boop, pushes the buttons in Meta, and out comes this result, which is either like yay or boo, or like
Yeah.
you did great, kid, or you suck, right?
Yeah.
And what really is painful is those like you suck moments that happen, especially when nothing's changed. You're running the same ads and uh, you know in an evergreen campaign with a decent account structure, because there's a lot of really decent account structures. And then one day it goes haywire. And then I imagine that slow like printer comes out and it's just a message that says you suck today.
Yeah.
And you're like, damn it, I don't understand
Yeah.
why, and I don't know what to do about it, but I suck today. I guess I must do something. I guess
Yeah.
I must be in motion. And then oftentimes that motion destabilizes an ad account, and
Yeah.
you're right back, chasing your tail.
Dude, we have an kind of internal joke at OG where whenever we go through like a little lull or just like a day or two that's bad, on the day that bounces back, we'll slack each other and be like, oh, we're good at marketing again.
Yeah.
And the joke is like, we were good at marketing yesterday too, but due to whatever factors outside of our control, or maybe inside of our control, but not, affected by the ad account itself. Like we didn't forget how to sell watches. It was just a blip. Or it was just, a product or seasonality, like you mentioned. So that's our joke is like, oh, we're good at marketing again. Like we
Right.
forgot. Now we're good.
It's like my email guy quit. Now my ads suck. Right. Like
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
something completely disconnected happened, and everything's gone haywire, and I have no clue what to do about it,
Yeah.
because there's not really a logical answer. It's not a problem created by your creative suddenly fatiguing or your account structure. Oh no, it worked and now it sucks. Like
Right.
there's way more at play than people realize. Um, in the day to day, ongoings of a business, it's a big engine. So
So, what can people do to kind of isolate the variables? Let's assume they're tracking inventory well. Let's assume they're planning and forecasting for seasonality. What are some things that you've seen work really well on Facebook ads specifically for you guys this year?
yeah, again, like I think one of the most unsatisfying thing about whether it's, I mean, just marketing, advertising, advice in general, is there's always like this it depends element to it, right? And so like I'm not going to shy away from that. I try to always be clear about the lens in which I'm speaking through, because there's the this is what we do and this is what I've done lens, and then this is like in theory what could apply to the market as
Yeah.
well, or lens. But again, you can segment that in a gazillion different ways, right? So is your business growing? Are you trying to push new scales of revenue, new scales of efficiency with your marketing? You're trying to push down MER. You're trying to increase your ROAS, whatever your goal is, based on the directive of whoever you're receiving it from. Maybe you're the business owner and you need to specifically lower a KPI, whatever it is. Um, for us, this, whether it was the past year and moving into this year, I have always been very highly integrated with, as a senior leader, like with our founder and with the product design team. And so for us, we have been very fortunate in that we create products from a marketing lens to go out and advertise. So
Mhm.
we'll look at, like, for instance, if we're going to tackle the problem of growing revenue, we'll look at the different sizes and shapes and silhouettes of bags and find a product that, or a brand that already has an existing demand for a certain silhouette. And that gives us a roadmap for how we iterate with product. The benefit of that is it substantially de-risks like the investment, and it lets you know that with a much higher degree of confidence that, like, I'm not creating something from nothing here. And then the purpose of the advertisement is not to educate and to make people interested in something new. It's not new technology. This is a bag that we already know that there's a general market demand for and that consumers like, and we're going to make them interested in ours, which makes the job of the advertisement fundamentally much easier, because we try to make our products in a higher quality material than most competitors, and we try to offer them for a lower price. And we do that by creating leverage specifically through a very simple design. So our bags are not like highly featured or lined or have a lot of the typical trappings of like the luxury handbag market, but they're a much higher quality than the general handbag market. So for one, is like, okay, let's first and foremost, if you are a part of the leadership team, all the way down to you're just an ad buyer, is to try to do your best to be highly integrated with the operations team and the leadership team to give them advice about what may work on Meta as a product iteration or in the future, and be really really vocal about, again, what you're seeing and how either supporting a new strategy or continuing to support a product that's already working is going to help or hurt your advertising ecosystem. Again, assuming that you're already highly engaged in that, like, that's great. That's what you need to be doing. You need to be looking ahead because you can't rely on an ops person to see that, like, I plan to scale this campaign X amount this month, which will therefore strain inventory this new projected velocity over 30, 60 days. I'm going to go way ahead of him, and I'm going to let him know of my intentions.
Mm.
And then I'm going to begin to scale that ad there. So I'm not halfway through that journey, and all of a sudden the new adjusted velocity of the product lends itself to an out of stock. They can't help you if it's already too late.
Mhm.
So again, highly integrated. Um, I tend to avoid getting like super down deep into the technical about meta ads, as I think everyone's probably exhausted.
Good. There's enough of that out there.
There's enough of it.
Yeah.
I will say the probably like the number one. I won't even say it's a highly technical aspect of meta. I'd say probably the number one. I don't know if it's a KPI or how I'd like to phrase it, but one thing that I'd like more people to pay attention to is something we actually talked about, which
Mhm.
is clicking the little column on your Meta Ads Manager that says cost per 1,000 accounts centered, or account centered
Account
accounts
center
reached.
accounts
Yes,
reached. Yeah.
I know it's kind of a tongue twister.
Yeah.
Um,
On our internal spreadsheets, we've started calling it unique CPM because it's like,
I love that. We
yeah,
call it CPMA, cost per milli accounts,
yeah,
right?
there you
So
go.
it's more or less the same thing.
Yeah.
I think if there's one thing amongst the entire sea and conversation of how to structure an ad account, understanding what that column is telling you from as a piece of information to the business, meaning I'm able to see my CPM costs rise, and therefore I can somewhat predict volatility. Hey, Q4 is coming, and there's an election. I'm going to expect the CPMs to rise. Well, that's your cost per thousand accounts, or excuse me, your cost per thousand impressions has nothing to do with the amount of people in the market for your product. So if your
Mhm.
frequency shoots through the roof times your CPM, you're in real trouble if all of a sudden your CPMA, or cost per unique CPM, goes from that very comfortable, high five each other $15 mark all the way up to 80. And I've seen them above 100.
Mhm.
So amongst the highly technical advice, I would just say, like, click that column, start to understand what's happening. There are better and worse structures to minimize that cost, but that for us, really keeping an eye on that as kind of a leading indicator of how much performance we can expect from a given month has been like really pivotal to create stabilization of results.
I've heard Curtis, your founder, say that you guys aren't a bag company with a marketing department. You're a marketing company with a bag department. I think that speaks to what you're mentioning about how like marketing, is, if not leading, at least informing kind of like the product development strategy. Um, where I see at a lot of ecom brands, those two are totally disconnected. And like too often the founders are going with, what they want to make, or what they think would be cool, instead of relying on customer feedback, instead of relying on marketing data. Um, so I think that's awesome. Do you have any advice for kind of an ad buyer who might be scared to speak up on product because they might tell them, shut up, go buy ads? Is there anything they can do to kind of be like, hey, like this is some really important data or feedback or comments or whatever? How can they kind of earn their seat at the product dev table?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question. I'll say it's a treadmill. You're never done. Like
Hmm.
you never have like this unilateral voice to say like yes and no as the marketer. Even in my role as a CMO, like we're constantly talking about that very question, and I win. To be frank, I win and I lose a fair bit of the time. Um, Curtis saying we're a marketing company that sells bags is his way of saying like we have this engine and we have this fundamental understanding of like our ecosystem and this process of let's design something the customer wants. We're not a designer led brand. We're not an artist led brand. We really, what I think Portland Leather Goods did the best, and what made my job, frankly, as easy as it possibly could be over the past 7 years, is we really, really genuinely, I think, hit a hole in the market that didn't exist. I think that's pretty well evidenced by like a lack of competitor at in the nine-ish figure space. Above us is Coach and Fossil, and they're doing billions. And below us is a lot of these artisan handmade leather bags that we share a lot of characteristics with. So I think that hitting the product market fit by again being marketing led first is genuinely our superpower, and then constantly keeping it there. If you're the marketer and you're like, okay, I want to have a voice in that. I want to, I've heard some of your advice, and I want to bring to whoever it is my perspective on what would be easy to advertise on Meta and where I think we'd really crush it. I don't think there's going to be any shortcut um, to earning your stripes m- better than really hammering it consistently with as much data as you can possibly find. So we've gone from everything from like this is kind of woo woo in the air. Look at this brand. Look how many times they're posting this photo. Look how many times it's getting tagged in Instagram. All the way to using like inventory spy tools, right? To let's look at what Fossil is selling. Like this silhouette is crushing it. Why
Hmm.
wouldn't we attack a similar, silhouette? The more data I think you can bring to a leadership team to kind of show them the way, the better. On a spectrum, the more that that product iteration disagrees with the fundamental brand persona, I think you're going to have a harder time.
Yeah.
So I mean, like I know for sure that leather couches are a very big business. It's not going to be my top recommendation
Right.
in the next, executive meeting. Hey, we're going to get into the couch business, right? I know a lot of leather couches are getting sold. It's not my top recommendation. So I'd say start slow. You need to really work up the trust. You need to start to, making predictions and then watching those predictions come true. Publicly stating or delivering a forecast to whether it's your leader or as high above as you can get that memo or document in their hand saying, this is what I predict will happen in the next 30, 60, 90 days. And you've done the math and then you watch that come true, you're going to start to build trust in you to predict the future. And that might creep into your spot winning products, to spot winning product iteration, and then to, again, slowly earn your seat and convince people like this is the way. And then again, results talk. Like if you're a product or if you're a brand who has like a catalog of products like we do. So we're a bag brand, but we have 20, 30 different bags. Um, Being able to show, prospecting efforts. We started to advertise this bag and we got this response compared to this bag, which didn't get this response. Usually that money talks and it can kind of
Hmm.
dispel some of the feelings owners, founders, or even senior and executive leadership have about their pet projects or their favorite bags. It makes it really hard to be like, okay, this is what your opinion for them. It makes it really hard to justify on the other end. If you go to them and say, okay, this is what your opinion costs. Product A is objectively better than product B, has a lower cost per acquisition. This is, of course, ad libbing the perfect product here, right? It has a lower cost per acquisition. It has a higher retention or repeat buyer rate. It has a higher LTV over the next 60, 90 days, which means I can project future revenue coming in from repeat purchases. Then you can put that in front of them. And then the cost of essentially disagreeing, which is not an opinion you form from nowhere. It's data you collected to create, a perspective. The cost of disagreeing with that raises higher and higher and higher to eventually, it's my opinion that most sensible people are like, okay, let's go that way. So the more you can gather that evidence, I think the stronger you can make a case for iterating the product or brand in that particular direction.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to double click on what you said about kind of like start with like the more conservative, kind of like safer bet, not going straight from bags to couches. Because I think that kind of like low hanging fruit approach to new product, I don't even want to call it development because I'm really talking about like new product iteration, can be really big. And we've seen it a couple times here where like we had this silhouette of watches that crushed in a lot of materials we had and crushed in a lot of colorways we had. But the only collection that we had that didn't have a chrono silhouette in black was our whiskey barrel wood collection, which was surprising because that was one of our more popular collections. And it was just kind of like an oversight. We didn't have a black whiskey chrono. Um, and I don't want to flex too hard, but I suggested, hey, let's do one because that silhouette in that color seems to crush no matter what we do. Why don't we do that in this specific collection and see what happens? And now it's, you know, our second highest revenue generating watch this year.
Love it. I love
Um,
it.
and it's stuff like that that like I am not a watch designer. I'll put that on my resume now because of that one, but like I have no clue. You know, like I didn't design the silhouette. It wasn't my idea to put whiskey barrels in wood. But as the marketing guy, I was able to see like, hey, black watches crush, chronographs crush for us. Why don't we do one in this super popular collection we have? And that's kind of earned me my seat at the table a bit. I still have some product ideas that they shoot down, and I've struck out on some for sure. But yeah, like I think a lot of marketers, especially if you're new coming into the business with a fresh set of eyes, it can be like glaringly obvious, like, hey, there's holes in our product catalog that we should fill and are probably pretty safe bets to invest in.
I mean, 100%. We just recently like reviewed a list of, I think it was like our last 6 new product releases, and what there was a good reason for it. You know, at the time, maybe there was a shortage of the particular leather, but we went back and said we were missing our top selling leather in, I think, 5 of our 6 latest product releases. And so, you know what a really good way to increase the sales of those products are? I mean, put your best selling color in that product. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, this is low hanging fruit. An easy way to conceptualize this too is like, okay, what's the mechanism for which we make decisions on how to move the brand forward? Again,
Mhm.
it's different if you're an artist brand or if you're a founder led brand and they have some sort of creative vision, and that is the KPI to follow that closely. But like, go through your people don't know the Shopify filter exists. But you go, I mean, a lot of people I talk to don't know anyways. Go to your sales by product and add the filter customer type, and then type in first time. And now what you're going to see is a completely different perspective on the top selling products. And you can even, extrapolate that out to the variant level by your first time customers. And you'll see all of these different variants that you may or may not expect at the top, because you might have, let's say you have watch A and there's 30 colors. Well, when you look at that line on the chart, it's just going to say watch A. But when you really break that out, you might have 2 or 3 variants that outsell the rest of them combined. So
Mhm.
take that whole list and then just imagine how hard your job would be as a marketer, as a business, if you had released those products in exactly the opposite order of their best sellers. So, in other words, you started day one with your worst selling product, and then you moved to your second worst selling product, and then your third. Like, the business may not exist if you had gone at it in that direction, and then start to look and say, okay, well, all of these. And if you're lucky enough, like in your particular instance, to have a uh, a characteristic like a chronograph and a particular color, which is your, routinely sitting at the top of your variants sold list, like, I have a really good idea. Let's release more products like that.
Yeah.
Before we try to reinvent the wheel, why don't we just release a new silhouette and the color we know people like, in the style we know people love? Like,
Yeah.
great idea. You're a genius.
Yes.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Dude, and I think so much of this stuff like can be looked at as like boring, but it's like, well, if it's rooted in data, then give me boring all day because it's going to print money.
Love it.
All right, dude, you're touching on so many things. It's amazing. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. You like sneaky alluded to this, but I want to make sure everyone gets the explanation because it's something you explained to me probably a year ago, where you're like the like headline grabby version is like McCoy told me to throw half our inventory in a dumpster. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, that's a bad idea. What are you talking about? And it's your way of approaching like which products even deserve advertising spend, which products are a net positive when you acquire a customer with them. Can you talk a little bit about like how you evaluate which products are actually valuable for you to sell and which ones aren't?
Yeah, this is, I mean, we hit on this a lot. When it's because we've learned this painful mistake like more times than I can count, and it's by consequence of like how you actually get at this information, which takes time. So sometimes you make mistakes for 6 months in a row, and then you realize it and you clean it up. The I think that the context in which we were talking at that particular time was, and we were certainly in this boat too, where we had an attachment to every new product we were releasing. We were like, okay, we want to try this new style. It's a triangle bag. Well, if we're going to go through the effort of designing it and then producing it, we obviously need to advertise it, correct? Like we clearly need to spend months and months doing creative testing and iterative copy testing and throwing money at the wall trying to make this product successful, right? And when we abandoned that idea, we moved way more to like, you know what? We know what people like. They like these 3 or 4 products. Let's consolidate the majority of the money towards the products we know people like the most because we were running out of budget, frankly, taking it from the great products and giving it to test products and theoretical things that we wanted to see higher on the sales chart. And when you start to measure the spread of things like what is the customer acquisition cost differential between product A and product B? What is the repurchase rates? Again, like how many people are, if they buy this product as their first purchase, are coming back and buying again? Then what are they buying when they buy a second time? Do they buy a third or a fourth or a fifth? When you start to like look at the individual characteristics between product A and per se, what you might discover is it would be cheaper for you as a business over time to literally take the remaining inventory and throw that in the garbage compared to investing time, money, resources in acquiring, not just selling a product, but acquiring a customer who fits that product's lifetime journey
Mm,
or cycle compared to the other product. You're wasting money advertising the wrong things. I think that that's most especially true when, and we've had to do this a million times. So I understand the necessity for it, especially as you get deeper integrated into the operations side of it and the finance side of it. You're going to find inventory that is, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, like it's trash, and you need to clearance it and you need to get out of here. When you start doing things like, hey, I'm going to reinvest real estate from my bestseller on my homepage to this clearance product that we have an overstock of, you're investing high attention, high performing real estate on your website to a product you know is low performing. And so even if the CEO or the CFO or whoever it is feels better because they check the sales chart and they see more of that slow moving inventory on the chart, that's you're actually losing in the long run
mm,
because your global performance is getting worse. You're acquiring less of the customers you need of that very high LTV characteristics. And you're investing in products that you know are terrible. But oftentimes, and again, we do this all the time because sometimes you have to as a business operator. You get tasked as with a, hey, we have a lot of these things. You need to run ads for it. Yeah, I know the costs are a little higher. Yeah, I know the LTV cycles are a little worse, but go ahead and do it anyways because it solves my problem with money. So I'm going to use
mm,
the customers as a garbage can for low interest products. You're going to have to pay to throw them away essentially. And then 6 months from now, when you look at the several hundred or several thousand customers you acquired under this particular persona compared to this persona, and all of a sudden your returning customer revenue was lagging for the month based on your projections, you're going, what happened? So we sold shoes for a long period of time. Those customers were cheaper to acquire, but their LTV differentials were dramatically worse. And there was products that we advertised where, again, I'm speaking dramatically, but in some cases it was actually true, where it would have been cheaper to throw those products away than to advertise them compared to diverting that money to the winning products.
yeah, we saw the same when we first started chatting about this was probably like a year and a half ago. And we started doing that LTV analysis and looking at our CAC and looking at ultimately we kind of chose like 12-month lifetime profit dollars as like our metric to kind of judge these products on. And we saw some watches that we would have all called bestsellers. top dogs that didn't really make us any money. And then we saw some products that like were, kind of middle of the road, like mid-tier, pieces that produce a repeat purchase rate higher than anything else on our site. And we saw that when people add an engraving to their first watch to personalize it, they're way more likely to come back and buy again from us. So it's really shaped, kind of our focus and where we're investing our time and advertising dollars into, because and I think this sticks with everything you're saying about like integrating the marketing team to the business ops team, to the inventory team, to the finance team. Like the Facebook ad guy has some impact on repeat revenue. And like, don't wait for the email guy to get blamed on that, because that's something that can produce a ton of inconsistency and volatility in performances. If you go out and acquire 1,000 customers this month, but they'll never buy again, the next month and the month after are going to suck, and you're not going to know why, because your CAC looks good or the MER looks good. But it can really have an impact on like the long-term health of growing a profitable brand.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite pieces of advice that I heard at one of our marketing conferences. It sounded chintzy in the moment, and it'll certainly sound chintzy if you're not into this type of advice now. But it was said that precision minimizes effort. The difference between a street light and a laser that can cut through steel has nothing to do with the output of the light; it's the area in which it's focused on. So,
Mm-hmm.
as we like work as marketers, especially how I see my role as CMO is the majority of that time I'm spending it on alignment. So I mean, the majority of our conversation here is not about hardcore like technical meta tactics. It's about how do we take all of the different happenings in the business, and instead of them being at war with each other and tugging at each other, if they all just shoot at the same target, if we focus our effort like a laser on the direction in which we want to move forward, like we're actually where we want to be today. If we just
Mm-hmm.
stop pulling each other apart, if we just stop, advertising the wrong products because we can agree on how to analyze, how to categorize, how to, quantify what that even means. If we just, are have better communication between the ops and the advertising, so we're not constantly pulling each other apart because they don't know what you're advertising, and therefore it's leading to increases in velocity, which lead to an unstable inventory availability. We just stop tearing at each other and stop blaming at each other, and you
Yeah,
really have the right pieces in a business to stand above and look down at that 30,000 foot view and go, I'm going to align this and this and this and this. Your business is probably so much further ahead than you might believe it is, just if you get that alignment correct. And
dude,
then it
I
makes it so much easier to scale and grow.
I made that mistake a ton early in my career. Like I viewed selling out as product. I was proud of it. I was like, hell yeah, we sold out. Ops can't keep up with me. Like I'm the best, marketer ever. Uh, which is fine for a time, but it doesn't produce consistent, stable, profitable growth like you want it to. And something that we've done in the last couple of years is like try to marry inventory and ops and marketing as much as possible. So now, like when we look at Q4, we're coming up on it. If I know I have $1 million worth of inventory in this collection or this SKU, I know that like, okay, cool. That means I only can spend 350K advertising that, even if those ads are crushing. I don't want to blow that product out in October. Like the goal for us in Q4 is like, can we sell out of everything at noon on December 18th? That would be the goal. Like, can we time it that perfectly? And that can't happen without marketing and ops being in constant communication and rhythm of, exactly what's happening, what the plan is, and then how closely can we stick to that forecast.
I mean, you're exactly right. I was guilty of the exact same thing. I'm like, heck yeah, man, ops can't keep up,
Yeah.
right? Like, and then I look at my ad account, and I'm like, oh shoot, all my
And
ads
then
got
performance
labeled
sucks
as
for a month and a
fatigued,
half.
and my
And you're like,
performance
damn it.
sucks, and I
Yeah.
devalued my creative. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, no wonder you can't sell the product and you're still running ads. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, what do I do? I have to turn off my ad, like this campaign or this
Hmm.
ad set or this piece of creative, and oh, now I'm under on my budget for forecast. It's a nightmare. So like, the better you marry all those things and then just align them, like I, I promise the easier it'll get. Like, and oftentimes I see that it's missing. Like somebody who's brave enough to maybe that's not the right word, but can really see the forest through the trees and align all those things to the correct the goal. And oftentimes, again, like I said, you get that printout when MER is up or ROAS is down. You get that like printout that just says you suck. And you're like, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes it can feel like a deferral to be like, okay, this isn't my fault. And I actually have to go over to this other department and help stabilize it the best I can, or bring my perspective to help stabilize it, help them understand why it's not working, and go back and forth. And from everything from shipping costs to how your website is merchandised to your advertisements, your CRO efforts, they all affect, because you're on the tail end of everything as an advertiser. They all affect your performance. So most of the time, the biggest gains you can make for performance gains or new scale is it's just not in your ad account. It's just not.
Mm-mm.
But so much of the advice and so much of the conversation doesn't come from people like you and I who are brand operators out, because frankly, we're busy. It comes from people whose job it is to sell their opinion, from an agency
Yeah.
perspective. And I respect the hustle. I get it. But what's missing again is that brand integration, and focusing all the effort in the same spot, and you cut through.
Yeah, dude, I think that's so important. Both the lack of conversations, from people that are in our seats, and like I see it when I go to conferences, and I get to talk to you or Matt or Connor from Ridge or Connor from Hexclad. The ecom world is full of Connors.
Yeah.
But like 10-minute conversations with those guys and with you are more valuable than reading 100 Twitter threads. It's like, oh, this is a guy or a gal that's sitting in the seat that I'm in, whose goal isn't to make Monday's report look good, and whose goal isn't to keep his clients. The goal is to grow a long-term, healthy, profitable brand. And those things don't always align with the latest debate about cost caps on Twitter. So, all right, last thing I want to get from you, as we approach Q4, I'll give you my kind of like version of how we forecast and stick to that plan, and then I would love to hear yours. So we forecast ad spend, revenue, contribution margin, sales by SKU. We forecast that all by day for 365 days a year. It's especially helpful come Q4 because I don't believe in like waiting for performance to improve to scale. I think if you want to grow, you need to spend more money. And that's never more true than on like November 10th, where like performance is not there yet. Buyer demand has not, caught up. No one's thinking about Christmas besides marketers. And they won't be until this year, November 29th. Black Friday falls really late. But I know we got to get impressions and site visitors before then, in order to maximize the next 4 weeks of holiday shopping. So for us, that means we start scaling up our ad spend early in November, and we kind of stick to it almost no matter what performance is. It's the most stressful time of the year for me because we spend a bunch of money and revenue does not follow yet. But I trust the process that like we're filling the funnel, and these people will convert in the next month or so. That has created I think more stability in the end of November and December, but it's hard. And if you don't zoom out and see the whole forecast and have years of data proving this works, a lot of founders and CFOs and CMOs will be like, no, we can't double our ad spend early in November because performance sucks, and they're worried about that day's ROAS or MER or whatever. So how do you kind of approach that scaling period to maximize holiday shopping?
I mean, you said the cheat code. You said I know, and then X, whatever we need to do. So like, I don't think anything is going to replace being seasoned and having seen it,
Yeah.
a time or two, especially if that's in the same business. But even now, like if I was in your shoes or you were in my shoes, I mean, for us, again, but I loathe giant buckets of terminologies of all sorts, right? So for me, revenue, like what does that mean? There's this giant bucket that we call Q4 revenue. So I think a good rule when you start segmenting is like, let's segment by the largest segment first. Let's see how we can fracture this audience in the largest possible way first. So for us, we can basically split it down the middle by saying, what does returning customer revenue look like, and what does new customer revenue look like for the month? So if you're forecasting on the day, like you're mentioning, you're doing substantially more work than me or my team is doing. To be perfectly frank,
Really? Okay.
substantially more.
Okay.
One of the things that we know is half of all revenue, if not more, on any given month is coming from returning customers, because we've invested a lot in nurturing
I'm
those
jealous of that.
relationships. We know exactly how they behave. We know exactly the products they need. And again, that comes from all the things we talked about: advertising the correct products, constantly monitoring the LTV metrics on the day, on the week, on the month. Although, again, we're not being reactive on a day or anything like that. If we see a couple dollar drop in LTV forecast for the next 90 days, we're not going to freak out. But let's break it in half first and foremost: returning customer, new customer revenue. What we know for our business is that we can pull forward returning customer revenue reliably into the beginning of November and the beginning of Q4. So, with almost no risk to the latter revenue, it's almost always incremental or additive. So, for us, and again, combining this like robust marketing consciousness with product iteration, the beginning of November and into December looks like new product drops and new variant drops constantly, constantly, and early. And that lets us pull forward a lot of that returning customer revenue away from Black Friday and earlier into November. And then we usually hit them with something like a 12 days of Christmas deals and or new product drops where we can, really garner a lot of enthusiasm or repeat purchasers. And what that does is, again, if you have like a kind of a squeamish finance department, is it lets you start to pack in a bunch of revenue in the beginning of November while you scale ads. Even if that performance not there, there's a little bit more grace
Yeah.
seeing the ad spend going,
There's like a little
and you
bit
can
of
kind of,
cover of like, don't
yeah,
ask what my
exactly.
new customer return on ad spend right now, but blended is fine. So let's
Yeah,
just do that.
exactly.
Yeah.
In every finance meeting, we only talk blended, but all of a sudden we're
Yeah.
focusing on new customer and we're
Yeah.
like, getting squeamish. But no, I mean, to the point exactly, right? So sales are tend to look good. We know we can pull that back. We know that we can offer, them a similar, if not the exact same discount we're going to offer them on Black Friday. We're
Yep.
still going to do additional promotions and activations for Black Friday. And that's going to let us and de-risk a lot of our ramping spend into the Black Friday. Now, nothing replaces like the BFCM week.
Yep.
And I mean, you're never going to, if you could go into a casino and place your bets, only when you knew you were going to win, it wouldn't be all that fair. And advertising is certainly not gambling, but you definitely have to throttle to an uncomfortable level before you start to see that revenue come in, especially Black Friday. If you're
Can you
waking
say
up
that
Black Friday,
again louder for
yes, I
people?
know, right? It's not gambling, but you kind of you have to place your bets a little bit, right? I mean, again, there's no casino on earth that'll only let you place your bets once you've known you've won.
Yep.
So going into Black Friday, there is no replacement for throttling early. Like, you're gonna lose your slot. I remember one of the most panicked I've ever been was, at a holiday party on Black Friday, just trying to like
I can't believe you went to a
First
party.
I know, who knows, right? My son punished me. He ended up smacking my laptop with a bat the second I closed it, which I
Yeah.
I took as a sign from above that I needed to
Yeah.
work less. But, in any case, like, I remember typing in bigger and bigger numbers because I waited too long, frankly, to, like, type it to scale budgets in. I tried to go from, 0 to 100, and it didn't work, frankly. So now we scale very, very early. And, again, planning those returning customer activations pre and post Black Friday, let us know that, God forbid, something didn't go well on the new customer acquisition side. We can still pull back ad spend, run out those promotions like 12 days of Christmas, and blend out performance metrics to where we need them to be for profit metrics
Mhm.
by using returning customer revenue as leverage, which again is why we acquire new customers all year. We're
Yeah.
not acquiring them for their fantastic first order profitability, although they
Correct.
are. We're acquiring them for their future lifetime revenue. So we call those cards in. We ask for those favors, and typically they patronize us and above and beyond, and we can make sense of it either way.
That's awesome. Dude, that last clip is perfect. Like, I love the idea of like, and I've seen a lot of brands and marketers try and fail to do the approach of like, well, I'll just scale up ads on Friday.
Yeah,
And it's like, no, you're burning
bad.
money. Like, you're burning so much money, even though your dashboard might look good. Like, it might look okay. It might look like it's working. It would have been so much better if you scaled up early and then didn't spike spend on that day. I don't know about you, but like, our spend never spikes more than like 10% on Friday from where it was on Thursday or Wednesday or Tuesday or the week before, honestly. I think this year we're forecasted to get to our Black Friday level of spend a week before. And early on in jobs before I proved out that this works, founders were always very skeptical of both scaling up early and then not spiking spend on the day. But I think a lot of people make their decisions before Black Friday hits, and then on the day they're just going to see if there's a better deal. And I think that Facebook needs to have time to go find the right people. And yeah, I've seen a lot of ad spend wasted on Black Friday that doesn't get criticized and punished because blended looks good,
Right.
but it would have looked good anyway if you were spending the money earlier.
Yeah, for sure. Being defensive and protective of like, and that's, to be honest, I think that's like very late stage advertiser journey. Like
Yeah,
you're trying to make sense of this like hurricane that's happening all the time, but then eventually getting to the stage where you can, on behalf of the business, being very defensive and protective of the profit by not overspending and not just using, the blended metrics as a crutch. Although I literally just described
yeah,
a situation where you may have to, like, you don't necessarily want to waste money. Like we're gonna make a big bet here, but if it doesn't pay off, we know we have this fail safe. Is much different than like, whoops, I throttled way too hard, but don't worry, like
yeah,
blended looks fine. That
yeah,
we want to avoid mistakes generally.
yeah, for sure. Well, awesome, dude. Let's wrap it up here. My favorite question to end an interview on is there something you wish I asked you? Is there
That's
something
a
you were
great
like,
question.
"Oh, Nate really should ask about this because people need to know about it as we approach Q4?" What's something that I didn't ask you that I should have?
Man, that's a good question. I I will say maybe my second my kind of like passions inside of the marketing and advertising ecosystem kind of in order are like leadership and alignment. I think that's my number one job. I love just advertising. Like, although we didn't talk about much nerdy stuff, like I really do love it. I think there's a lot of ground to gain, especially when you get to those big budgets. 1% and 2%, efficiencies matter a lot, which is why people
Mhm.
argue about them a lot frequently. But number three, and I know that I've heard you talk about it more, and so I'm very excited. And I genuinely think it's the next wave of like the media buyers relationship in integrating with the e-commerce side as a whole is CRO. So like if
Yeah.
you're a media buyer and you're not obsessed with CRO, like you don't know what you're doing. I'm gonna put it,
Mhm.
frank like that. Like your job is to buy traffic, and then once it leaves the platform, Meta's job is over. So
Yeah.
I love the topic of CRO. I'm obsessed with it. We have
Dude, it's
usually
become my
two.
favorite thing to work
I
on
love it.
by
We
far.
usually have 2 to 3 tests going live at the same time,
Yep.
in different parts of the website with, clear data segmentation. Invest, invest, invest in CRO. I'll just put my headline for CRO is no matter how good of a copy you write for one ad, no matter how good of a creative you put in an ad account, you're going to raise the performance of that piece
Everything.
of creative at best, then maybe that
Right.
ad set if
Oh,
you're
right,
lucky,
right,
then
right.
maybe that campaign if you're lucky. You make one good CRO decision, every single piece of creative, every single ad set, every single campaign across all of your advertising channels gets better simultaneously with one good CRO decision. So once you have
And
a
your
good account
emails
structure,
and your
love
text
it.
campaigns
Yep.
and your influencer campaigns, it literally rises all boats.
I could talk for hours about CRO.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing, it may have been that. Like I love jamming on CRO. So
Well, that
get
might have
obsessed
to
with it.
be another podcast. You might have
Love
to
it.
come on tactical and practical and spit some knowledge on there. Cause yeah, dude, it's become such a big part of what we do. I'll give the quick story for everyone. The end of Q2 last year, we looked at our numbers and we were growing profitably and we were happy. But as I dug into the data, we had grown site traffic by like 100% and we had grown revenue by like 45%. And I was like, that's not great math. Like, what's going on? And we saw conversion rate got cut in half, and we were like, oh shit, like that's not ideal at all. So then I declared CRL was the number one priority of the department. Me, a guy who had never done CRO on a real kind of scale, and no one on my team had either. And I was like, we're gonna figure it out. It'll be fine. And we started testing prices, offers, content on our website. And I cannot believe how impactful it is. Like, I still to this day don't understand that I can change a couple words in a headline, or we can change a banner image, or we can change a price by $5 on a $300 watch, and conversion rate and revenue per session and profit per session shoots up by 25%. Like big, meaningful changes to the business. So yeah, it's been crazy impactful. We'll have to do another episode for sure.
Love it. I'd like for hours and hours I could talk about
Yeah,
CROs. It's
yeah,
silly.
awesome. Cool, cool. MacCoy, thanks so much for joining us. I know people are going to get a ton of value out of this episode. You're someone that I've looked up to and learned from in the industry a ton. So thank you for your constant mentorship from afar. I appreciate that. I think you've got like the worst ratio of knowledge and experience and wisdom to followers and clout that this industry has to offer. So please, everyone, where can they follow you and soak up your knowledge?
Hey, I'm on Twitter or X, however you decide to
Twitter.
slice that pie, and
Yeah.
I'm with you there too. I'm also on LinkedIn, just my first and last name. I really appreciate it, Nate. It's been great.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.